A shy waitress walks into a luxury hotel to return a businessman's wallet. What he discovers inside will change everything. Hello and welcome to 80s Love Stories, where I, your favorite narrator, Christopher, bring you an exciting love story straight from the unforgettable 1980s. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. Diana pulled her worn denim jacket tighter around her shoulders as she stared up at the gleaming glass facade of the Burlington Grand Hotel. The brass fixtures and polished marble entryway seemed to mock her scuffed sneakers and faded uniform from the small diner where she worked across town. Her heart pounded as she clutched the expensive leather wallet she'd found left behind at her table just hours ago. The business card inside bore an impressive title, Daniel Crawford, CEO of Crawford Industries. She had debated just dropping it off at the front desk, but something about the family photo tucked inside, a smiling little girl with her father's eyes, had compelled her to deliver it personally. The doorman gave her a suspicious glance as she entered the opulent lobby, her footsteps echoing across the marble floor. At the front desk, the clerk's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched as Diana explained her purpose. "Mr. Crawford is in an important meeting," the clerk said dismissively. "I'll ensure he receives it." "Please," Diana insisted quietly. "I'd like to return it myself, the photo inside. It seems important." The clerk's phone buzzed and she answered it, turning away from Diana with obvious relief. Diana stood awkwardly, feeling increasingly out of place among the well-dressed hotel guests streaming past. "Miss?" A deep voice behind her made her jump. She turned to find herself face to face with a tall man in an impeccable suit, his dark hair touched with distinguished silver at the temples. His eyes were a striking blue, the same ones she'd seen in the photo. "Mr. Crawford," she managed, "I found your wallet at the diner." She held it out with slightly trembling hands. He took it, his expression unreadable as he opened it and checked the contents. "Everything's here," he said, sounding surprised. "Including—" He pulled out several $100 bills. Most people would have helped themselves to a finder's fee. Diana felt her face flush. "I would never," she said softly but firmly. "That money isn't mine." Something shifted in his expression as he studied her, curiosity replacing his initial wariness. "At least let me reward your honesty," he said, reaching for the wallet again. She shook her head. "No reward necessary. She gestured vaguely at the wallet. "The photo of your daughter. I wanted to make sure it got back to you safely." "Join me for coffee," he said suddenly. "Please, I'd like to properly thank you." Diana's first instinct was to decline. She didn't belong in this world of luxury and power. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of genuine warmth that made her hesitate. "Just coffee," he added with a slight smile, seeming to sense her uncertainty. Before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A woman in an elegant dress was arguing heatedly with the doorman, her voice carrying across the lobby. "I don't care about your guest list. I demand to see Daniel Crawford immediately." Daniel's expression darkened. "My ex-wife," he muttered. "She wasn't supposed to find me here." He turned to Diana with sudden urgency. "Would you mind if we continued this conversation somewhere else? I know a quiet cafe around the corner." Diana found herself nodding, though alarm bells were ringing in her head. What was she getting herself into? As Daniel guided her toward a side exit, she caught a glimpse of the angry woman's face and the flash of something metallic in her designer handbag. The simple act of returning a wallet was about to pull Diana into a web of mystery and danger she never could have anticipated. And Daniel Crawford's grateful smile held secrets that would change both their lives forever. The cafe around the corner was a cozy establishment with worn leather booths and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee and pastries. Diana slid into a booth, still trying to process how her simple act of returning a wallet had led to this moment. Daniel Crawford sat across from her, his expensive suit looking oddly out of place among the cafe's humble decor. A waitress brought them coffee in thick ceramic mugs, nothing like the delicate china Diana had glimpsed at the Burlington Grand. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to do with them. "I owe you an explanation," Daniel said, his voice low and serious. He glanced toward the window, checking to see if they'd been followed. "That woman at the hotel, my ex-wife Margaret, she's been causing trouble since our divorce, but lately it's gotten worse." Diana listened intently as he continued. "The wallet, I didn't just lose it. I think it was taken from my hotel room and deliberately planted at your diner. The question is why?" "But who would do that?" Diana asked, her mind racing. "And why your wallet specifically?" Daniel's fingers drummed nervously on the table. Inside that wallet was more than just cash and photos. There was a key, a small brass one. "Did you notice it?" Diana shook her head. "I only opened it enough to find your ID." "That's probably what saved you from more trouble," he said grimly. "That key opens a safety deposit box containing documents that could affect the future of my company. Margaret wants those documents, but she's not the only one." A passing siren made them both jump. Through the window, Diana caught a glimpse of someone hurrying past, their collar turned up against the wind. For a moment, she thought she recognized the distinctive suit of one of the hotel staff. "Mr. Crawford," she began hesitantly. "Daniel, please." "Daniel, I should probably get back to work. My break ended." She glanced at the clock and paled. "Over an hour ago." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notepad, quickly writing something down. "Here's my private number. If you notice anything unusual, anyone watching you or asking questions, call me immediately." He paused, then added, "I know this is a lot to ask of a stranger, but you're already involved. Your honesty in returning the wallet may have disrupted some very carefully laid plans." As Diana stood to leave, Daniel caught her wrist gently. "Wait, you never told me your last name." "Parker," she said softly. "Diana Parker." "Thank you, Diana Parker," he said, releasing her wrist, "for being honest in a world where that's increasingly rare." The walk back to the diner was a blur of confusion and second-guessing. The familiar grease-stained walls and checkered floor tiles of Joe's diner had never been a source of comfort before. But today they represented normalcy, something her life had been distinctly lacking since finding that wallet. "Where have you been?" Virginia, the head waitress, hissed as Diana tied her apron back on. "Joe's been asking for you." "I'm sorry, I had to—" Diana stopped, realizing she didn't know how to explain what had just happened. "I'll make up the time, I promise." Virginia's expression softened. She'd taken Diana under her wing when she first started at the diner, fresh out of high school and desperate for work. "You look like you've seen a ghost, honey. Everything okay?" Before Diana could respond, the bell above the door chimed. A woman in an elegant dress, Margaret Crawford, walked in, her heels clicking purposefully against the linoleum floor. Her eyes locked onto Diana immediately. "You," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The honest waitress. Might we have a chat?" Virginia stepped forward protectively, but Diana touched her arm. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'll handle this." Margaret slid into a booth, her expensive perfume creating a cloud of luxury that seemed to repel the diner's usual greasy spoon atmosphere. Diana sat across from her, reminded of how she'd sat across from Daniel just hours ago. But this felt entirely different. "Let's not play games," Margaret said, opening her designer handbag. "I know my ex-husband gave you something for safekeeping. Name your price." "There's been a mistake," Diana said firmly. "I just returned his wallet. That's all." Margaret's perfectly painted lips curved into a cold smile. "Darling, do you know what Daniel Crawford is really worth? Do you know what he's capable of? That man destroyed my life, and now he's going to destroy yours too, unless you're smart enough to work with me instead." She pulled something from her bag, not the metallic object Diana had glimpsed earlier, but a thick, manila envelope. "Inside here is proof of everything I'm telling you. Take it. Read it. Then call this number." She slid a business card across the table. Diana didn't touch either item. "I think you should leave." Margaret's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "You're making a mistake, Diana Parker, a very big mistake." She stood, leaving the envelope and card on the table. "I'll be in touch." After she left, Virginia rushed over. What was that about? Diana stared at the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm not sure," she lied, "but I have a feeling this is just the beginning." That night, after her shift ended, Diana walked home to her small apartment above Marcus's music shop. The usual sounds of saxophone practice from below were oddly comforting. She'd barely unlocked her door when she realized something was wrong. The apartment was dark, but she always left a light on, and there was a scent in the air, expensive perfume. Her hand froze on the light switch as a voice came from the darkness. "Miss Parker, I believe we need to have another conversation about that wallet." This voice didn't belong to Margaret Crawford. It was male, unfamiliar, and carried an edge of danger that made her blood run cold. Diana's mind raced to the business card in her pocket with Daniel's private number, but her phone was inside the dark apartment, and she wasn't alone. Diana's heart pounded as she stood frozen in her doorway. The voice from the darkness carried authority and menace in equal measure. Her mind raced through her options: run down the stairs, scream for Marcus downstairs, or face whatever waited in the darkness. Before she could decide, the overhead lights suddenly clicked on. A man in an expensive suit sat in her threadbare armchair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp and calculating. Behind him stood another man, broader and more obviously threatening. "Please, Miss Parker," the seated man said, gesturing to her small couch, "join us. I'm Walter Reynolds, Chief Financial Officer of Crawford Industries." Diana remained in the doorway, her hand still on the light switch. "How did you get in here?" Walter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The same way we get anywhere, with the right connections and sufficient motivation. Now, shall we discuss the wallet?" "There's nothing to discuss," Diana said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I returned it to Mr. Crawford, that's all." "That's not all, though, is it?" Walter leaned forward. "You see, that wallet was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. Margaret Crawford was supposed to find it, leading to a very specific chain of events. Instead, you interfered. Now we need to know exactly what Daniel told you." A floorboard creaked behind Diana. A third man had appeared, blocking her escape route. She finally stepped into her apartment, letting the door close behind her. Her mind flashed to the business card with Daniel's number still in her pocket. "He didn't tell me anything," she insisted. "We just had coffee, and he thanked me for returning the wallet." Walter's eyes narrowed. "Coffee. Interesting. Daniel Crawford doesn't have just coffee with diner waitresses. What else?" Before Diana could respond, music suddenly blasted from downstairs. Marcus's saxophone, louder than usual. The broad-shouldered man by the window winced at the sound. "Should I tell him to shut up?" he growled. "No," Walter said sharply. "We don't need any unnecessary attention." He turned back to Diana. "Miss Parker, let me be clear. Crawford Industries is on the verge of a major acquisition. The contents of that wallet, particularly a certain key, could derail everything we've worked for. Now, if Daniel gave you anything for safekeeping—" "He didn't," Diana interrupted. "I don't have anything of yours." Walter studied her for a long moment, then stood. "I believe you. For now. But understand this, you're now part of something much bigger than yourself. Choose your next moves carefully." He pulled out a business card and placed it on her coffee table. "When you realize Daniel Crawford isn't the man you think he is, call me." The three men left as quietly as they had appeared, leaving Diana alone in her apartment that suddenly felt much less safe. She immediately checked her hiding spots: the loose floorboard under the bed, the hollow book on her shelf, the back of her dresser drawer. Nothing seemed disturbed. The saxophone music from downstairs faded, replaced by a gentle knock on her door. "Diana, everything okay up there?" Marcus's voice was concerned. She opened the door to find her landlord holding his saxophone, his kind face creased with worry. Marcus was an older man who had taken Diana under his wing when she first rented the apartment. "I saw 3 men in suits leaving," he said. "Didn't look like your usual visitors." Diana managed a weak smile. "Just some business matter. Thank you for the music earlier." Marcus nodded knowingly. "Thought you might need a distraction. Volume's good for drowning out unwanted conversations." He paused, then added, "You know, my brother's a police officer. If you're in any trouble, I'm okay, Diana assured him, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true, so just a misunderstanding about something at work. After Marcus left, Diana sat on her couch, her mind spinning. The wallet, the key, Margaret Crawford, and now Walter Reynolds. What had she stumbled into? She pulled out Daniel's business card, then remembered his warning about phones possibly being monitored. Instead of calling, she changed into fresh clothes and headed out. The street was dark, but the neon signs from nearby businesses provided enough light to make her feel somewhat safe. She walked quickly, constantly checking over her shoulder, until she reached the nearest payphone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Daniel's number. 1 ring, 2 ring. Crawford speaking. His voice was guarded. "It's Diana Parker," she said quietly. "Your chief financial officer just paid me a visit." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Are you all right? Did he threaten you?" "Not directly, but—" She glanced around the empty street. "I don't feel safe. What's really going on, Daniel?" "Don't go back to your apartment," he said firmly. "I'm sending someone to pick you up. Where are you?" Diana hesitated. Could she trust him? Walter's warning about Daniel not being who she thought he was echoed in her mind. "Diana," Daniel's voice softened, "I know you have no reason to trust me. But right now, I'm the only one who can protect you from what's coming." A black car turned the corner, moving slowly down the street. "There's a car coming," she whispered into the phone. "That's not mine," Daniel said urgently. "Get out of there, now." Diana hung up and quickly moved away from the payphone, ducking into the doorway of a closed shop. The car crawled past her hiding spot, its tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. Once it passed, she emerged and walked quickly in the opposite direction. She found herself heading toward the diner, drawn to the familiar sanctuary of her workplace. Through the windows, she could see Virginia closing up for the night. The older waitress looked up as Diana approached and immediately opened the door. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Virginia said, ushering her inside. "What's going on with you today?" Diana sank into a booth, exhausted. "Virginia, if I tell you something crazy, will you believe me?" "Try me, honey." Virginia slid into the seat across from her, just as another black car slowly passed by the diner's windows. Diana's heart raced as she recognized one of the passengers, the broad-shouldered man from her apartment. Virginia followed her gaze and her expression hardened. "Back room," she said quietly, leading Diana through the kitchen to the diner's small office. Once inside, Virginia pulled out a key and unlocked a filing cabinet, revealing not files but a small safe. "Virginia, what?" "Shh." Virginia quickly opened the safe and pulled out an old photograph. "Is this the man you're running from?" Diana gasped. The photo showed a younger Virginia standing next to Walter Reynolds, both wearing Crawford Industries badges. "There's a lot you don't know about Crawford Industries," Virginia said grimly, "and a lot they don't know about me. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you could change everything." Virginia's hands trembled slightly as she spread old photographs across Joe's desk in the cramped back office. Each image told a piece of a story Diana was struggling to understand. Young Virginia in a Crawford Industries uniform, Virginia with Walter Reynolds at what appeared to be a company picnic, Virginia standing next to a younger Daniel Crawford, who was holding a small child. "I was Daniel's secretary before his first marriage," Virginia explained, her voice barely above a whisper despite the closed door. "Back then, Crawford Industries was different. Daniel's father ran things with integrity. The company helped people, built things that mattered." She pointed to a photo of an imposing factory building. "This was their main manufacturing plant. They made medical equipment, good quality, affordable stuff that smaller hospitals could actually buy. It wasn't glamorous, but it saved lives." "What changed?" Diana asked, studying the images of a younger, more idealistic-looking Daniel Crawford. Virginia's expression darkened. "Walter Reynolds happened. He came in with big ideas about expansion and profit margins, started pushing for cheaper materials, cutting corners. When Daniel's father refused, Walter began gathering allies on the board of directors." She pulled out another photo, Walter with a group of men in suits, including the broad-shouldered man who'd been in Diana's apartment. "These are Walter's people. They've been working for years to take control of the company, But they needed something specific, something hidden in that safety deposit box. "The key in the wallet," Diana murmured. Virginia nodded. "The box contains proof of what Walter and his allies have been doing, proof that could ruin them. Daniel's father collected evidence for years before he died, knowing someday it would be needed." A noise from the front of the diner made them both freeze. Through the small office window, they could see shadows moving past the drawn blinds. "They're looking for you," Virginia said grimly. "We need to—" A sharp knock on the diner's front door interrupted her. "Miss Parker," a familiar voice called. "It's Daniel Crawford. Please, if you're in there, let me help." Diana moved toward the office door, but Virginia caught her arm. "Wait, how do we know it's really him?" "And because—" Daniel's voice came again, closer now. He must have found the back door. "Virginia knows I always carry my father's watch, the one he gave me the day he made me promise to protect what he built." Virginia's grip on Diana's arm relaxed. She quickly gathered the photographs and moved to unlock the office door. Daniel stood there, looking considerably less polished than he had earlier. His tie was loosened, his silver hair slightly disheveled. "They went to your apartment," he said to Diana without preamble. "When they didn't find you there, they started checking everywhere they thought you might go. We don't have much time." "Time before what?" Diana demanded. "I need to understand what's really happening here." Daniel glanced at the scattered photographs on the desk, his expression softening when he saw them. "I kept these all these years, Virginia." "Someone had to remember the truth," she replied quietly. Daniel turned back to Diana. "The key in that wallet. It wasn't supposed to be there. I always carry it with me. But somehow it was taken and planted, along with the wallet at your diner. They wanted Margaret to find it. She's working with Walter now, though she doesn't fully understand what she's involved in." "But why plant it at all?" Diana asked. "Why not just steal it?" "Because they needed a witness," Virginia interjected. "Someone to testify that Margaret found evidence of wrongdoing. They're planning something bigger than just taking over the company." Before Daniel could respond, the diner's lights suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. In the distance, they could hear the sound of breaking glass. "Back door," Virginia whispered urgently. "There's a tunnel in the basement. It connects to the old storage rooms under the block. They used it during Prohibition." They moved quietly through the dark kitchen, guided by Virginia's knowledge of every creaky floorboard and obstacle. The basement door was hidden behind shelving, which Virginia expertly shifted aside. As they descended the narrow stairs, Diana could hear footsteps above them. The basement was pitch black until Daniel produced a small flashlight. Virginia led them to what appeared to be a solid wall, then pressed against a specific brick. A section of the wall swung inward with a grinding sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet basement. "Stay together," Virginia instructed as they entered the tunnel. "There are side passages, but they're either caved in or they lead to dead ends. Follow the main path." The tunnel was narrow, with pipes running along the ceiling and walls that dripped with moisture. Their footsteps echoed despite their attempts to move quietly. After what felt like an eternity, Virginia held up her hand, stopping them. "Listen," she whispered. From somewhere ahead came the sound of voices and footsteps. Someone else was in the tunnel system. "They knew about this," Daniel muttered. "Coas, how did they know about this?" "Because," a voice called from the darkness ahead, "you're not the only one who knows old secrets, Daniel." The beam of a powerful flashlight suddenly illuminated them, momentarily blinding Diana. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out Walter Reynolds' figure, flanked by his broad-shouldered associate and two other men. The wallet, the diner, this chase, it was all theater, Walter said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "We needed you to show us where you really hid the evidence, and now you've led us right to it." "What are you talking about?" Daniel demanded. "The safety deposit box is empty," Walter interrupted. "We've already checked, which means the real evidence is hidden somewhere in these tunnels. Your father's old smuggling routes? Oh yes. I know all about how the Crawford family built their initial fortune during Prohibition. These tunnels weren't just for storing liquor, were they?" Diana felt Daniel tense beside her. Whatever Walter was implying seemed to have struck a nerve. "Virginia," Daniel said quietly, "get Diana out of here. Take the East Passage." "The East Passage is caved in," Virginia protested. "No," Daniel's voice was firm. "It isn't." Understanding seemed to dawn on Virginia's face. She grabbed Diana's arm and pulled her toward a side tunnel as Walter's men started moving forward. "You can't hide it forever, Daniel." Walter's voice echoed behind them. "The truth about Crawford Industries will come out one way or another." As Virginia led her through the darkness, Diana could hear the sounds of a scuffle breaking out behind them. She wanted to turn back, to help somehow, but Virginia's grip was like iron as she guided them through the maze of tunnels. "What truth?" Diana gasped as they ran. "What are they really looking for?" "Something worse than corporate fraud," Virginia replied grimly. "Something that could destroy not just the company, but lives. Lots of lives." They emerged from the tunnel system through a hidden door in the basement of Marcus's music shop. Diana could hear the familiar sound of his saxophone playing above. He often practiced late into the night. "We'll be safe here for now," Virginia said, catching her breath. "Marcus is one of us, one of the old Crawford Industries family. But Diana—" She gripped Diana's shoulders, her expression deadly serious. "You need to understand what you're really involved in now. This isn't just about a wallet or a key anymore. This is about a secret that's been buried for decades." Marcus's practice room in the back of his music shop was a sanctuary of worn leather chairs and vintage instruments hanging on the walls. Diana sat in one of these chairs, a cup of strong coffee warming her hands, while Virginia paced nervously. Above them, Marcus continued playing his saxophone, a signal to anyone watching that everything was normal. "Crawford Industries wasn't always just medical equipment," Virginia began, her voice low. "During the war, they had government contracts. They made specialized parts, components that went into various military devices. Daniel's father insisted on maintaining the highest quality standards, even when others were cutting corners to increase profits." She pulled an old newspaper clipping from her purse. The yellowed paper showed a younger version of Daniel's father, standing proudly in front of the factory. After the war, they discovered that some of their components had been used in classified projects that should never have existed, projects that hurt people. "What kind of projects?" Diana asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Virginia's expression was grim. "The kind that governments prefer to keep buried." When Daniel's father found out, he was horrified. He started gathering evidence, documenting everything, but he also began secretly helping the people who had been affected, providing medical care, support, whatever they needed. The saxophone music above them suddenly hit a sour note, Marcus's signal that someone was approaching the shop. Virginia quickly stuffed the newspaper clipping away as footsteps descended the back stairs. Daniel appeared, looking disheveled but unharmed. "Walter's men are searching the main tunnel system," he said, closing the door behind him. "They won't find anything there." "What happened?" Diana asked, rising from her chair. "I led them down a false trail, then used one of the old escape routes." He turned to Virginia. "You told her." "Some of it." Virginia nodded. "Now she needs to understand what's really at stake." Daniel sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "Walter thinks my father hid evidence of the company's wartime activities in those tunnels. He's partially right, but what he doesn't know is that my father hid much more than that. He hid the truth about what Walter and his associates are planning to do now." "Which is what?" Diana pressed. "They want to revive those old projects," Daniel said quietly. "But not for the military this time. They've found private buyers, people who would use that technology without any oversight or restraint. The profits would be enormous, but the human cost—" He trailed off, shaking his head. A soft knock at the door made them all freeze, but it was just Marcus. He entered quickly, his face serious. "Margaret Crawford is upstairs in the shop. She's asking about Diana." Daniel stood. "We need to move." "Virginia, take Diana to—" "No," Diana interrupted firmly. "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of only getting pieces of the truth. I want to talk to her." "Diana, it's not safe," Virginia protested. "None of this is safe," Diana replied. "But Margaret deserves to know what she's really involved in. She's being used, just like they tried to use me." Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "She's right. Margaret may be angry with me, but she's not cruel. If she understands what Walter is really planning. Diana didn't wait for him to finish. She was already heading up the stairs, her mind made up. She found Margaret browsing through sheet music in the shop, her expensive perfume incongruous with the dusty shelves. "Mrs. Crawford," Diana said quietly. Margaret turned, her perfectly made-up face showing surprise that quickly turned to calculation. "Miss Parker, I had a feeling you might be here." She glanced around the empty shop. "Is my ex-husband here too?" "Yes," Diana replied honestly. "And there are things you need to know about Walter Reynolds and his plans for Crawford Industries." "Walter Reynolds is trying to save the company from Daniel's mismanagement," Margaret said dismissively. "He's shown me the numbers, the potential for growth." "He's shown you what he wants you to see," Diana interrupted. "Just like he tried to use me to find something in those tunnels. But this isn't about corporate takeovers or profit margins. This is about people's lives." Something in Diana's tone made Margaret pause. "What are you talking about?" "Let me show you." Daniel's voice came from the back room. He emerged holding a thick folder. "These are the real numbers, Margaret, the real plans. Walter's been lying to both of us." Before Margaret could respond, the shop's front door chimed. The broad-shouldered man from Diana's apartment walked in, followed by two others. "Mrs. Crawford," he said gruffly, "Mr. Reynolds would like to speak with you. Now." Margaret looked from the men to Daniel, then back to Diana. In that moment of hesitation, Diana saw something shift in her expression, doubt creeping in where certainty had been. "Actually," Margaret said, her voice steady, "I think I'll stay and hear what my ex-husband has to say." The broad-shouldered man took a step forward. "That wasn't a request, Mrs. Crawford." "No," Marcus's voice rang out as he emerged from the back room, his saxophone case in hand. "It wasn't a request, it was a mistake." He opened the case, revealing not an instrument, but old photographs and documents, more evidence that Walter hadn't known existed. The men started to move forward, but stopped when they heard police sirens approaching. Through the shop window, Diana could see multiple patrol cars pulling up outside. "You called the police?" the broad-shouldered man demanded. "No," Virginia said, joining them from the back room. "I called my brother, the police commissioner, and I told him everything." The next few minutes were a blur of activity as police officers flooded the shop. Diana watched as Walter's men were arrested, their faces showing shock that their carefully laid plans had unraveled so quickly. But even as handcuffs clicked into place, Diana couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Walter himself wasn't here, and the way the broad-shouldered man was smiling despite being arrested. "Daniel," she said urgently, "where's the real evidence? The documents from the safety deposit box?" Daniel's face paled. "In my hotel room. I moved them there when..." He didn't finish. They were already running toward the door, knowing they were racing against time. Walter had orchestrated this whole scene, keeping them distracted while he went after his real target. The night air was cool as they piled into Daniel's car, Diana in the passenger seat with Margaret and Virginia in the back. As they sped toward the Burlington Grand Hotel, Diana's mind raced. The wallet, the chase through the tunnels, even Walter's men getting arrested. It had all been an elaborate diversion. The real game was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than any of them had imagined. The Burlington Grand Hotel loomed ahead, its illuminated windows a stark contrast against the dark sky. Daniel parked haphazardly at the entrance, tossing his keys to the startled valet. As they rushed through the lobby, Diana noticed signs of disturbance: an overturned plant, scattered papers behind the front desk, a security guard lying unconscious near the elevator. "He's already here," Daniel said grimly, heading for the stairs. "My room's on the 4th floor." They climbed rapidly, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Virginia, despite her age, kept pace, while Margaret had kicked off her expensive heels to move faster. When they reached the 4th floor, they found the hallway eerily quiet. The door to Daniel's suite was slightly ajar. "Wait," Diana whispered, grabbing Daniel's arm before he could rush in. "Listen." From inside, they could hear the sound of papers being shuffled and drawers being opened. Then Walter's voice, "It has to be here somewhere. Keep looking." Daniel motioned for them to stay back, then carefully peered around the doorframe. He quickly withdrew, holding up 3 fingers, 3 men inside. The safe behind the mirror, he whispered to Diana. That's where the documents are. But there's something else they don't know about, something my father left for exactly this kind of situation. Margaret stepped forward. Let me go in, she said quietly. Walter still thinks I'm on his side. Before anyone could stop her, Margaret smoothed her dress and walked confidently into the room. Walter, what's taking so long? The shuffling sounds stopped. Margaret, what are you doing here? Looking for you, of course. Your men were arrested. It's all falling apart. We need to move quickly. From their position in the hallway, they could hear Walter's footsteps approaching Margaret. The police commissioner showed up at the music shop. How did that happen? I called him, Margaret said smoothly. When I saw your men getting rough, I thought having official presence would help calm things down. Was I wrong? There was a pause, then Walter's laugh, cold and humorless. You always were a terrible liar, Margaret. Who's out there with you? Everything happened at once. Walter lunged for Margaret, but she was ready, driving her knee up with precise aim. Daniel burst into the room, tackling one of Walter's associates as Diana and Virginia followed. The suite erupted into chaos. Diana found herself facing the third man, who hesitated just long enough for her to grab a heavy lamp from the desk. She didn't need to use it. Virginia appeared behind him with a vase, which shattered against his head. The safe, Daniel shouted, still wrestling with his opponent. Get to the safe. Diana ran to the bedroom, where an ornate mirror hung on the wall. She pushed it aside, revealing a small wall safe. But Walter had followed her. Step aside, he said, pulling out a small revolver. This is bigger than you understand. The technology we're developing, it could revolutionize everything. The profits alone would come at the cost of people's lives, Diana finished. I know about the classified projects, about what happened during the war. Walter's eyes narrowed. Then you know the potential. Think about it. You could be part of this. No more waiting tables, no more struggling to make rent. Name your price. Diana stood her ground. Some things aren't for sale. Everything's for sale, Walter snarled, raising the gun. Now open the safe. No, a firm voice said from the doorway. Margaret stood there, holding something in her hands, the folder from Marcus's saxophone case. It's over, Walter. The real documents, the ones showing your deals with foreign buyers, the illegal testing, all of it, they're right here. Copies have already been sent to the FBI. Walter spun toward her, his gun hand shaking. You're bluffing. Am I? Margaret's voice was steel. I was your secretary before I married Daniel. I saw things, made copies, kept records. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was really protecting the truth. Daniel wasn't the problem with Crawford Industries, you were. The sound of police sirens grew louder outside. Walter's face contorted with rage as he turned back to Diana, his finger tightening on the trigger. Several things happened simultaneously. Daniel appeared behind Margaret. Virginia shouted a warning, and Diana's hand found the hidden panel beside the safe, the one Daniel's father had installed years ago. She pressed it just as Walter fired. The bullet hit the safe as a section of wall suddenly swung open, throwing off Walter's aim. From the hidden compartment fell a stack of papers, the original documents Daniel's father had collected, along with photographs, letters, and a worn journal. Walter lunged for the papers, but Daniel was faster. The two men grappled as the police burst into the suite, led by Virginia's brother. In seconds, it was over. Walter was disarmed and handcuffed, his face a mask of impotent rage. You don't understand what you've done, he spat as they led him away. The people I'm working with, they won't stop just because I'm arrested. Maybe not, Daniel said quietly, but they'll have to do it without Crawford Industries' resources and without the formulas and designs they wanted to buy. Those died with my father. As the police gathered evidence and took statements, Diana found herself standing by the window, watching the city lights below. So much had changed in just one day, all because she'd chosen to return a wallet. She felt someone beside her and turned to find Daniel. He looked tired but relieved. Thank you, he said simply, for being honest, for being brave, for helping save my father's legacy. What happens now? Diana asked. As to the company, We rebuild, Margaret answered, joining them. The right way this time. Daniel and we've had our differences, but we both loved his father, and we both want to honor what he built. Virginia approached, carrying a tray with coffee cups she'd ordered from room service. First order of business, she said with a small smile, is reinstating the medical equipment division, making things that help people instead of harm them. We'll need good people, Daniel said, looking at Diana. People we can trust. How would you feel about a job that doesn't involve waiting tables? Diana smiled, thinking of her small apartment above the music shop, of Marcus playing his saxophone, of the diner where all of this began. Actually, she said, I think I'd like to finish college first. I had to drop out when my parents died, but say no more, Margaret interrupted. Consider your tuition taken care of. Call it a finder's fee for returning the wallet. They all laughed, a release of tension, of fear, of the weight they'd been carrying. As they talked about the future, Diana felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Later that night, as she finally returned to her apartment, she found a note had been slipped under her door. Inside was a key, not to a safety deposit box, but to her future. For when you're ready, Daniel had written, there will always be a place for you at Crawford Industries, but first, go chase your dreams. That's what my father would have wanted. Diana held the key tightly, thinking about choices and consequences, about honesty and courage, about how a simple act of kindness could change not just one life, but many. Outside, she could hear the faint sound of Marcus's saxophone drifting up through the floorboards. No longer a warning, but a celebration. Days turned into weeks, and life began to settle into a new normal. Diana continued working at the diner while preparing to return to school, though now she served coffee to a different crowd, FBI agents and corporate lawyers who came to gather evidence about Walter's conspiracy, accountants working to rebuild Crawford Industries, and journalists trying to piece together the story. Virginia took on a new role as special advisor to the board of directors, her years of quiet observation and record-keeping proving invaluable. Margaret and Daniel, their bitter divorce transformed by shared purpose, worked together to restore the company's original mission. They never did recover all of Walter's international connections, but they did something better. They used the company's resources to help those who had been harmed by the old secret projects. Marcus still played his saxophone late into the night, but now his music was just music, no longer a code or warning signal. Sometimes, Diana would sit by her window listening to him play, thinking about how the smallest decisions could have the biggest impacts. One evening, as she was closing up the diner, Daniel stopped by. He looked different now, still elegant, but with less weight on his shoulders. He slid into his usual booth, and Diana brought him coffee without being asked. "Last day?" he asked, noting the textbooks peeking out of her bag. Classes would be starting soon. "Second to last," she replied, sitting across from him. "Virginia's training my replacement." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both thinking about everything that had changed. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You know, I never told you why I came to the diner that day, when I lost the wallet." Diana looked up, curious. "I assumed Walter's people planted it." "They did," he nodded, "but I figured that out pretty quickly. I came back because—" he paused, seeming almost embarrassed. "Because my father used to bring me here when I was young. He said this place reminded him of what was real, not profit margins or stock prices, but real people living real lives. He said you can judge a company by how it treats its smallest customer, and you can judge a person by how they handle simple tests of character." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I found this in his old things. I think he'd want you to have it." Diana unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a simple silver compass, its face worn but still precise. Engraved on the back were the words, "True North never changes." "He gave that to me when I started at the company," Daniel said softly. "I lost my way for a while, forgot what it meant. But you've never lost your true north." Diana felt tears in her eyes as she held the compass. Outside, and the last light of day was fading, and Marcus's saxophone began its evening song. She thought about the wallet that had started everything, about choices and consequences, about true north and finding your way. "Thank you," she said finally. For everything. Daniel smiled, leaving enough money on the table to cover 100 cups of coffee. No, he said, standing to leave. Thank you for reminding me what matters. Sometimes it takes a stranger's honesty to help us find our way home. As he walked out into the gathering darkness, Diana held the compass and smiled. Tomorrow she would begin a new chapter, but she would keep this reminder of how a simple choice, to do the right thing, to be honest, to help others, could change not just a life, but an entire world of lives. The diner's lights flickered once, like a wink, and Diana began her closing routine for the second to last time, humming along with Marcus's distant saxophone, the compass safely tucked in her pocket, pointing true north. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family, and don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.